Paint is the oldest and most versatile of mediums in decorating. Still, surprisingly, the cheapest. Since the early cave dwellers, man has loved to embellish his surroundings. We all love to make our homes unique and attractive. Masterstrokes is a video series that uses paint in a very particular way, showing you how to create illusions with paint, with realistic imitation of woods, marbles, semi-precious stones, simple trompe-l'oeil panels, and other special oil color effects. Italy, a land of a multitude of marbles. And a part of Italy, Carrara, is where the majority of the white marbles come from. And there's no more beautiful marble than the multi-veined white marble that they simply call Carrara. To summarize for you briefly, dissecting the board first with sufficient darker veins, working in one or two semi-structural veins. At the top and the bottom, you'll see whereabouts you can fit those in, and then the very fine veins, which are structured like a honeycomb. And where you have very fine breaks, you can add the little fine veins to it. Then, of course, you have to soften that, and the softener must be used as though you were using a feather. And you go down the long lines of veining at right angles to start with. When that is completed, we go on to the ivory black veining. Now this time you don't take quite so much as the Payne's grey. It's a slightly denser medium, but you do mirror the veins. You go over, first of all, your main structural veins that dissect the board, the secondary veins which link them up, and of course using the feather when it's drier over the minor fractures, the sort of honeycomb shapes, so that you don't make that heavier than the central structure. Not forgetting, of course, those tiny little dots that show the veins going in a transverse formation through the marble. And there you have a completed sample of white Carrara marble. There are some marbles you can't use throughout the home, but of course Rosa Aurora is one you can use almost anywhere. And of course you will discover that most people like pink. Cadmium red brushed in like clouds, because it's Rosa Aurora, it's the aurora, the blush of rose, so it must always be that it's a cloudy formation as such. Starting with the burnt sienna, always from one side to the other, dissecting with other major structures, as you have seen. Then we move on to the grey veins, which are very simple, and run through no particular area, and it breaks right through the color because this fracture occurred later after these other veins were formed. And then the ragging, crumpled rag, changing it around all the time, making sure not to get too much color on the rag and depositing those colors where you don't want them. Now the last thing is to show the very fine crystalline fractures that occur where the darkest color is, and sometimes just off that center. It will break through simply because those crystals were formed in the final fractures that occurred to make this marble the shape it is, full of the veins it has. Italy is a land of most beautiful marbles, and for me there's none more beautiful than that comes from Siena. This marble reflects the wonderful soft yellows and ochres of the hillsides of Siena. And now is the time to rag it and soften it. Now this ragging is fairly, you press down fairly heavily, but not so that you remove all the color. There's one other little bit of veining to be done, and that is that you do get stress fractures in this particular marble, and it always breaks through a field of color. And there we have the completed Siena marble sample, used in the noblest of homes, palaces and churches, and why not yours? Or better still, your clients. Nuvolatto means milky clouds, which means you have a grey marble that will go with almost any marble that you do. Now I'm going to put in the main structural vein and pressing down and releasing so much color at a time and just stutter that movement. Don't be put off by the fact that it's a grey marble. There's such a mixture of greys in there that it would go well with any marble that you choose to put it with, and it lives very well on its own. Something that people often say, grey isn't a colour. But as you can see, grey is a very beautiful colour. Rose brush marble. This is the most beautiful pink brecciated marble with extraordinary lozenge shapes in it. Now this marble is nearly quarried out, so it's a very good marble to learn for anyone who wants to become a marbleizer. I want you to shape with the spirit around those lovely lozenge shapes. This marble is nearly quarried out. Therefore, this would become a most valuable addition to your portfolio of faux marble. If you've had the good fortune to visit St. Peter's in Rome, you will have seen this marble bordering practically all other marbles in that wonderful cathedral with such stunning results. I must stress that the 4 stages of feathering are absolutely essential. You can't just drop one out because you're tired of doing it. Without those 4, you don't get the intensity. The drawing on of the shapes, when you see this marble, you'll understand what a variety they are and where they form. The same with the grey and the green. They all have to balance and fit in. A little easier with the geodes, because with that shape you've only got a sort of saucer shape, that thin, tiny, elongated shape, and the little roundels to ovals. And then of course the feathering over the blacks. If you overdo that, just paint the black shape out again and go over again with the feather. And there you can see with the application of varnish just how much depth comes out of that because we've put that amount of work in. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into this marble, but it's really well worth it to get that result. Honduras mahogany, the world's most well-known hardwood, and an absolute must for your repertoire. So I'll begin here, and you will see that the hand and the body are still as one. Now, I'll soften with the right hand, and it's a gentle softening. Flog slightly away from the panel, a slightly crab-wise approach to it. And it's one movement, one swift movement. Don't worry about making mistakes. That's going to happen to you. Now, the heartwood of Honduras mahogany is the most varied and the most lovely of all the hardwoods. And I would like to suggest to you that you go out and look at as many panelled rooms as you can and pieces of furniture. Walnut is a timber very much admired worldwide and very beloved of cabinet makers everywhere. In particular, the Queen Anne period in England, the French Empire, and of course, early American colonial. And a very good reason why you should include it in your portfolio of faux bois. We get to that point there, little movement in and out. I've nothing against American walnut or any other European walnut, come to that, but English walnut has a particularly fine interlaced black and brown grain, something that I think sets it aside from the others. The shape and configuration of the grain of bird's eye maple lends itself very well to the cabinet maker's art, very much in evidence in the 16th and 17th century, and of course we're having a great revival of it today. We can do 2 lines this time. And softening is the same, 90 degrees to the board, just gently to start with, all the way down. And then same gentleness, but the lines will appear. With the growing popularity of golden blonde woods, there's no doubt that bird's eye maple is going to be a very valuable part of your repertoire of faux bois. Until the end of the 19th century, pine was used to panel rooms purely for painting purposes, never used as a decorative wood. And the turn of the century, when there was a predilection for blonde woods, it became very popular when 1 or 2 people stripped their panelled rooms and discovered the most beautiful Georgian pine. From that moment on, everybody wanted to strip their rooms to have a pine panelled room. And those who didn't have the panelled room called in the grainer to grain it. Draw it right the way through. There you have a lovely straight grain. putting in a burr just about there for a knot, and then finish right the way down to the bottom, back up, lead the other line, and there we are. In that central little gap, put the colour in. Pine is the most readily available timber throughout the whole world, but that unfortunately is the poorer example of it. It's not the beautiful pine, and certainly not the sort of pine that you see that I have imitated here. This particular pine is very expensive and not readily available. Oak is a timber that's found throughout the whole of the world, and because of its slow growth, one has a great variety of sap shapes. And of course, if you can't imitate oak, then you will not be able to call yourself a grainer. Now, in drawing out any sap of oak, you really need to study, and I'm going to draw a very typical oak sap, but I would like you always to look at every piece of oak you ever see and study the sap. You're holding the actual comb at 45 degrees, but a 10-degree angle. Just comb through, and there you see the lovely ripple. These are the growth lines when the oak sap is split down the middle, and they change into this configuration. From the splendor of Jacobean times until today, oak has never been more popular. And let me wish you good luck with all your practice. Limed oak became very popular at the turn of the century, along with other blonde woods like bleached mahogany, sycamore, and elm. And of course, the reason for that was a reaction to the darker tones of the timbers used in Victorian days. And although it had a little fall off in its popularity at the end of the last war, it has again become very popular, therefore essential for your portfolio. What this is the first real sort of basic part of the straight grain, because this runs straight into the straight grain and down to a point where we can actually make a turnaround and for the quartering to come back the other way. Don't brush backwards, just brush in the one direction towards you. And there we are, that's as much as you need. It just shows off a slightly harder back edge to the figuring. I may seem like an awful nag, and I am really. You must go and study the timber. Any piece of oak that you see, dark, medium or light, doesn't really matter. If it's even obscure and very hard to see the sap, look at it, study it, sketch it, go back and practice it. I'm going to demonstrate a variety of painted decorative finishes. Principally a multi-mottle, that's an oil color multi-mottle finish, a dragged finish, and a painted trompe moulding. Now we're going to even out that colour, so pick up a little of that colour that started at the top, you see, and you can go back over this as many times as you like. Now just clean up that little quirk line, and there you are. You can see already that even from that angle, how that stands away from the board. Don't be put off by what people might say about, oh, I wouldn't have painted moulding. You would be amazed how many people love the joke of having painted mouldings that aren't really there. Malachite, used to great effect in the Winter Palace in Leningrad and the Kremlin in Moscow, and of course by Fabergé on his most beautiful boxes. This was used on urns and pillars, pilasters, and inlaid into tabletops. One of the two semi-precious stones that I am doing on this tape, the other being lapis lazuli. Another exotic mineral from Russia. Be careful that when you start, you don't overload the feather, and you'll see as you soften just how much it will take in the way of brushing. So you know that wherever you touch down, you're going to leave a deposit of gold, exactly as found in lapis lazuli. There's nothing more extravagant looking than lapis lazuli, and you'll be surprised how many people are going to ask you to do this. So be careful and make sure that you make a really good job of it. I'm going to demonstrate tortoiseshell on a yellow and a red background. Push that from one side to the other, get some nice variation of shape, softening as before, and it's against the brush strokes. They're the first things that must go. And now I'm going to change this red board for an already prepared yellow board. There's a nice natural rhythm there. See that line? Pick up that line, come back, twist it round. There we are. That's just finished off to those edges. These samples of the videos will give you some idea of the detail and quality of my approach to specialist painting. I hope also it will give you a desire to go on and do it for yourself. I know you'll enjoy the practice, and I'm certain that you will benefit professionally from the video series.